Hey everyone, in this video I'm gonna walk you through the track that I did for my NULLSPACE sample pack. And obviously this track is supposed to be a fair representation of the kind of content that you're gonna get with this sample pack. So there's pretty much no processing in there. As you can see, all the tracks are empty. There's some EQ and some compression going on some of these, but very little. And the vast majority of these tracks don't have any processing on them at all. So I'm gonna play through the track and you can skip this with the timestamps if you want. And then I'm just gonna go through the entire track. So first we have this really short intro section before we go into this build-up. Pretty much everything up until here. So then on top of this, the main drivers of this are just these 3 hits. And I wanted to have a bit of a more intense whoosh in there, so I used some atmospheres and risers. These 2 risers down here, and I've also used the whoosh part of another whoosh hit in front of this. It's just this, and then we just have the whoosh of this hit. I just cut these risers down here up a bit in accordance with these hits, so that we get this stutter effect here. And then all of this transitions into a downer with a hit on top, these 2. And the risers just continue below that. And then we transition into the next section, which is the build-up section. And then I use the boom to create some kind of rhythm. At the same time, we also start with a new bunch of risers below that. And these pretty much keep going throughout this entire build-up section with these small pauses in here where I have some distorted effects. And so I have 2 breaks in there where I've used signature sounds and brahms and downers. So this is a signature sound without the tail, and this transitions into a downer for this really short break down here. And then again, for the transition to the next section, we're just using a hit. And everything continues the same. We keep the booms and we keep the risers. And then we have a very similar section again with this break in here. And I'm just using different samples for this one. But the idea is very similar. So we have a really distorted sound first, and then we transition into a downer. And this is just part of a signature sound. And then up here we have part of a Brahm sound, and then down here again a signature sound that I layered with this. And then below this, just again the same idea as we go into the downer. And then the risers are getting a bit more intense, and I've also added an atmosphere. To once more increase the tension, just a bit on top of the risers. And then we go into this pause where there's complete silence. And then we get into this final portion of this track where I wanted to increase the tempo a bit. So for that I used a different boom and pretty much just used it like a kick to create this pulse. This is always the same sampler throughout this. But I use fade outs to tame the ones in between, so we have different accents within the pulse, mainly on the 1st and on the 4th note. And so this is the same pattern throughout this entire section. And below, the risers are just there, slowly rising, and here the main section is actually all of this. I have 2 elements here that kind of stand out a bit. One atmosphere and a Brahm that I've layered on top of each other. And so you can hear them throughout this section. And then I'm just supporting them with a bunch of hits. So there's a hit right when they start. And there's also another whoosh hit up here. And then there's another hit as well. And then there's always this signature sound in between. So as you can see, all the elements are cut up a lot, so all the hits don't really have a long tail or anything. I've cut all of this up and faded it out so that this signature sound can kind of stand out with its reverb tail. I have some additional hits there for the transition into the big final hit. So this is just this section here, again with this whoosh hit, and then these two additional hits. And we get this really short pause here, where we then repeat the same pattern with the same hits. And just I have, again, the rises on top of this are cut up to match the hits. And then we're going to go into the final hit here. There's not too much going on. It's just this Emperor Brahm, which already has quite a punchy attack. And then I have just a whoosh on top of this that I'm mainly using for the texture it has. And then just a really simple, solid whoosh hit. And all of this together. And well, after that, we go into the outro boom, where I'm just using a whoosh hit with a nice texture, and then a boom and a really subtle downer in this case. And then just with the downer, the idea is to shut everything down. But it's really subtle. Depending on your listening environment, you probably won't be able to hear it. But yeah, so I think the most important thing about these tracks is to come up with some kind of rhythmic musical pattern. And then it's just a matter of playing around what kind of effects are going to fit in there. And as you can see throughout this track, I've been playing a lot with heavily cutting the samples up. Very few of them actually have a reverb tail. I've kind of been switching between different samples quickly. I've started with this idea here in the build-up part, where I just have these really short breaks in here where I use a distorted sample and a downer, and over here again. And then I've kind of built up on that in the final section here, where again you can see a lot of cut up samples. I've cut the reverb tail of all the hits that I'm using in here, and this one signature sound was allowed to have a longer reverb tail. And the rises are just steadily going on in the background throughout this entire track pretty much. So I hope this gives you a better idea of how you can create tracks like this with just a few samples actually. And maybe also shows you that you don't necessarily have to use a lot of processing on your sounds. You can also get creative with just layering a lot of things and cutting things up. And of course there are a lot more other things that you can do as well. You can reverse sounds and you can pitch them around and things like that. So there's a lot of very basic audio editing techniques that you can also use. And you should be able to do all of this in your video editing software as well. So let me know if you have any questions. I will link the trailer for the track in the description, and take care.